you know, oh, they've just been whatever out on the street or, just they're never coming back kind of thing, right? Don't forget the prodigal son. He came back after he'd been out roaming around doing who knows what, but he came back to the house of his father. Well, I am back with a fresh word for you today. And the word God gave me is your Joseph is still alive. God is reviving even what you thought was dead, even what you thought was buried, even what you thought was hopeless, when you thought it was over and it was never coming back to life again. The Lord, He is saying, I am reviving everything that you think has been finished off, written off, what the enemy tried to write off, tried to destroy, tried to finish, that it was never coming back. God says, wait till you hear the news. Wait till you hear the news that is coming to your house. Glory be to God. I pray that you can just start to get into agreement with me right now. God is saying, wait until you, child of God, hear the report. You see, when they heard that report, it was like it was too good to be true. He could not take it all in. That was how amazing it was. But it said, when he saw the carts, when he saw some evidence. Well, let me tell you, that's the kind of report that is coming to your house. I just decree and declare, God sent me to tell you that I am going to, says the Lord, send a report that you haven't heard and a report that you thought you were never going to get. I'm going to send you some news where you thought it was hopeless. You thought there was no way they were coming back. It was coming back. There was no way you could ever do it again at this point in time. But you see, when he saw the carts, then he had the evidence. God says, I'm going to send you some evidence. I'm going to send you the carts. I'm going to send something that's going to show up so that you will understand that I am a God that can raise things from the dead. And no matter what, even when you've given up on it,
growth of stone, of gemstones, and of metals and crystals, and even of gold, by your new means. In a recent or prior video on my own channel, a non-publicized, relatively private channel of mine on YouTube that I have going on, which can be considered as like a prior preceding video in a sort of way or a sense to this one, I discussed a little bit regarding how I came to receive or understand or obtain the information that I am about to share here. The implications of this information can be, well, there's hardly a roof on this, really. Before we proceed, in short, to summarize that prior video that was on there, that's on there right now still, and just to note, this is being recorded on the day of Sunday, August 3rd of 2025. Interestingly to note that we have had this day correspond to a certain specific holiday in the Jewish calendar, Tisha B'Av, the 9th of Av, which has some potential significance in relation to this, along with other things in the prophetic tradition that corresponds there too. But for now, let's stick to this, the physical, the scientific, and all these things here. Though, almost ironically, God showed me these things. What I'm about to share, firstly, is reproducible. That means with enough trial and error, and it shouldn't take too long, many or most people should be able to recreate at least significant portions enough of what I'm conveying here in order to verify or corroborate that what I'm putting forth here is not, it will fail to be found that it is entirely false. You get that? Continuing. Proceeding secondly, as it goes on to state here, this is going to present basically means to achieve growth of materials via what are really new insights and what come by new combinations of both pre-existing and new concepts applied in basically new ways. How did the proto levels basically of these insights take hold and set on? This was all the way back in 2016. What happened to me after starting a regimen of sorts of a combination of unregulated supplements, one can say, or otherwise it could be said drugs, basically comparable to over-the-counter drugs, but maybe research chemicals could possibly be another name. In essence, these are prescription pills in other countries or compounds that would have obtained prescription status in other various countries but just fell short, so they maintain themselves in this category of being so to speak research chemicals or unregulated compounds, legal to use and all this, although my case wasn't particularly well documented, as we'll find out here. And they got several facts and details wrong, actually. In essence, this is about me. What happened? The part that they didn't fully capture completely and get in this report, only which aspects of which are covered in other places, including medical records from back then.
Trying to wash the spider out. I got spiders crawling out your mouth. Spider-Verse.
We've got the medical record.
I stay in another dimension. Fear is non-existent. Suit up and swing through the city. Hey, annihilate. I'm wide awake. Be very afraid. I'm in my own world. Give me space. I'm in my own universe. Give me space. I'm focused, I'm chosen, I'm golden, I'm stronger, on missions, ain't no folding, a soldier, my vision, persistent, I took the game, it's over, I made a name, it's global, my enemy, pass over, I took it way to the top, I had to learn to be smart, I had to move with my heart, keeping my eyes on the part, cause it get evil and dark, when it comes to my opponents, I know how to beat them, I know to defeat them, living my life by the moment, somebody calling, somebody gon' need me. Just came to my senses, I stay in another dimension. Fear is non-existent. Suit up and swing through the city. Hey, annihilate. I'm wide awake. Be very afraid. I'm in my own world. Give me space. I'm in my own universe. Give me space. Okay, we bounce and shake. We roll and rock. I gotta set it straight. The block is hot. Something's come over me. I hit a lock. And tell my enemies I'll never stop. No, nothing can shake me now. Tell the block I made it now. Yeah, the whole town is talking now. I swear nothing can stop me now. All this boosting up my senses. I won't start, but I finish. I shoot my shot, bet I won't miss it. Only way to go is go the distance. Nothing can shake me now. Nothing can break me down. Tell the whole town we poppin' now. Nothing can shake me now. This is unbelievable. I'm about to go Peter Parker. I'm Spider-Man. If he ain't me, he's just a creepy crawler. Fear is non-existent. Suit up and swing through the city. You're ever giving. That's a given. It's crazy to say this. You're the greatest. I can't explain it. I know that you know the truth. They can't deny you. Yeah, they can't deny you. It's true.
come a long way, kid. And let me just say this. Oh yeah. You're the main character now. You're the main character now. Lift your head to the sky.
There's no scenario in which you'd lead this life where you don't work for me.
No scenario. I see every scenario. I see 50 scenarios. That's what it does, Carl. It puts me 50 moves ahead of you.
Worth the risk? What would you do?
English?
No.
You speak English?
Yes.
Take me to the hospital now.
Hospital.
It is estimated most human beings only use 10% of their brain's capacity. Imagine if we could access 100%. Interesting things begin to happen. Yes?
Professor Norman, my name's Lucy. I just read all your research on the human brain. It's a little rudimentary, but you're on the right track.
Thank you.
I can feel every living thing.
Since when did you start writing Chinese?
Since an hour ago.
What happens when she reaches 100%?
I have no idea.
You have no idea what kind of enemy.
That van's gonna rear in that taxi.
What?
The driver's distracted. He's texting. He's going 30 miles an hour. He's 60 feet to stop. He doesn't have room.
What the?
I see everything, Carl. I'm 50 moves ahead of you and everybody else. What makes you think I don't have a guy with a beat on you right now? How do you know you're gonna be alive this time next year?
What are you doing? What are you doing?
Something's pumping at half mast in there. Walls of your heart are dilated. Aortic valve stenosis. You're gonna need to get that replaced. But you already knew that.
Maybe we should cool off, talk again.
All this knowledge, you can unlock secrets that go beyond our universe. I'm not even sure that mankind is ready for it.
It's like all things that make me human are fading away.
Greatest lesson in human history. That of the story of the biblical King David and the spider.
On awakening from that coma in 2016, one of the things that set on very apparently, and there were witnesses to this, and for years this is preserved and maintained and been the case, essentially what is hyper-olfaction, a genuinely super sense of smell, and smell everything. Well, there's a couple things I can't smell, a few things I can't smell that most people can, but beyond that, I've gained hyper-resolution to being able to tell and read the sense of extremely many, very many things around. People cannot ordinarily pick up. Gone on this. People around me know. It's been these stories have been talked about in other places. Hyperacuity of perception. That's secondary. It's included within the general sensory and even acquired savant syndrome.
It's a little known fact that brain injury, which is generally thought to cause the loss or impairment of a cognitive ability, can in some cases also cause the appearance of extreme skills, especially in mathematics, geometry, music, and artistic expression. Plus, popular portrayals like Dustin Hoffman's character in the movie Rain Man have served to romanticize the idea in the public's mind. Often these savants, however, are born with otherwise debilitating neurological disorders, and yet still possess these extreme mental powers. Growing evidence is beginning to show that such conditions are more than just an accident of birth. They are, in fact, the result of a specific brain injury, and with fewer mistakes than non-synesthetes. In a sense, unlike the earlier discussed Wernicke's or neglect patients who have lost the ability to consciously perceive a dimension of the cognitive world that undamaged individuals just take for granted, these individuals suddenly become aware of a perceptual dimension that was previously repressed to their undamaged brain. This perhaps suggests that there are potentially neurological governors that restrict our conscious access to certain categories of perception, and thereby restrict our ability to metacognitively process that information.
The human brain is the most mysterious piece of matter on Earth, and the more we know about it, the more magical the whole system seems to be. However, it is only now in the 21st century, with new techniques, that scientists can for the first time open up the secret chambers in our heads and watch the complex system of hundreds of billions of neurons at work. Among scientists' most fascinating subjects of study are a small group of enigmatic talents, the so-called savants, the knowing ones. Savants can multiply 5-digit numbers in their heads, or know 12,000 books by heart, or play a melody on the piano after hearing it only once. Over half of savants are autistic. Others develop these superhuman talents only after a brain injury. Experts all over the world are now starting to ask themselves, is it in fact a defect that turns a person into a genius? Is there a hidden genius within all of us?
Until we can understand the savant, we can't understand ourselves. And no model of brain function is going to be complete until it can fully account for this incredible disparity.
Hello from the Trefford Center in Fond du Lac, Wisconsin, a unit of Agnesian healthcare dedicated to better understanding the human brain and human potential. What I want to do today is to share some things that we do know about savant syndrome 120 years later after J. Langdon Down first described savant syndrome. Savant syndrome is a remarkable condition in which persons with a developmental disorder, including autism or other central nervous system disease or injury, have some astonishing islands of genius that stand in marked, jarring contrast to overall handicap.
The entire story of everything that has happened to me since awakening in that coma would be impossible to even write down or tell over, really. But for the purposes of where we're going here regarding the subject matter, one of the most important things that came to me as a spontaneous realization, simply drawing this fact in about reality, not long after awakening. And this occurred to me for reasons I'm not going to get into so very much here, but simply as to very basically state, it spontaneously occurred to me that there exist what we can term as scientifically the non-classical routes to growth by crystallization, but specifically I realized that this was crystallization and growth of substances and generally anything, just about anything that's supersaturate, a solid, very basically. But crystals, in essence, these are will crystallize and grow in a way that functionally forms more of whatever the underlying matter is from less of the matter. In essence, almost seemingly matter-wise, as a pseudo or seeming free lunch. True growth of something, a higher number of molecules of something, say in your hand or wherever, that literally didn't exist within the system, not pre-dissolved in that form as that compound or even as those same atoms in the surrounding fluid, which is of course the challenge and the contrast or the alternative from what the classical pathways have been understood as being scientifically and traditionally. Without paying so much attention to why I was saying this was one of the first biggest things I was saying to people around me in the days while I was in the hospital after waking up. Everybody, you need to understand this. The crystals grow, I told them. And that it's been made apparent to me for whatever the reason is. Everything's growing inside of you, in your bodies, in the environment too, at much slower rates, and so on. This was basically the most important thing that I've ever come across, though I didn't even fully understand exactly why at the time, but I had some insight into this reality, if even at a subtle level. And not long after getting home, I found the first significant article in detail, and there's a fuller article beyond what's just available here in this preview setting, essentially. Strangely, the truest thing here is that even though it's almost 10 years later, still much remains unknown. They haven't bounced off of this and leveraged the insights, the potential insights that are available here. Well, we're going to get into this very soon. It's very important. Without me combing line by line through the whole extended 10, 11 page article, whatever it was, in the original full form, to pick out select things that support and hint at the place that we're going to start bridging out from and stemming and spanning out to continue on beyond where that particular article goes. The phenomenon that's described in the article that's taking place in real life is what's called crystallization by particle attachment. But where particle for us specifically means now, not just particles in the standard sense, but really by ion complexes. You can imagine this, really by ions. By negative charges is another even more basic, almost overly basic way to say it, but really by electrons. I spent the next few years after this picking up aspects of this, refining mental and conceptual models of what is happening within this process and how, and also why. There are a number of things I could tell about and describe and start pointing to instances in real life. I may do this in later parts of the video, at least covering a large portion of the subtle and interesting things. But even with a good AI or pattern recognition system with intuitive, but I'm going to proceed simply in a almost over summary way. We're going to skip a lot of details. We're going to get to the main portion of this that matters for you here for. By early summer of 2023, a final grand piece of insight really came, which enabled essentially a new discovery or simply recognition of that which already has been true all along, where our recognition enables application of this pseudo or quasi-miraculous, quasi-supernatural or seeming supernatural from the rigidified framework of the prior understanding, the over-naive model as we would see it in hindsight now. This is what we're looking at. I was at a certain point in time given information or received information through, call it the ether, shall we say, okay? That's one word for it, perhaps. Information that if I proceeded with a certain experiment of sorts in a certain way and tried something, that I would obtain certain results. Those results were indeed obtained. Furthermore, ostensibly it's something that other human beings should be able to experience the truth of observationally and experientially. I already had, as a side note now, one person. I gave the large portion of the details that I lived out since that time, about 2 years ago now, to one person since that time, and only one person. And she corroborated and confirmed that indeed, yes, her experience was the same with regards to certain specific and limited aspects of the broad thing I'm about to share, such that it served as a whole confirmation of the validity of what I was putting across. We'll start our story by simply describing what happened, beholding how phenomenal and unbelievable it seems. Then, once we we'll start at the end, so to speak, then we'll go back around and start filling in the why does it happen this way. The story starts with a stone or a sort of gemstone we find. There's a purplish or kind of lilac colored, this is called a mica or lepidolite, two names for this. It has an interesting crystalline structure. This is unique, unlike most crystals, unlike most gemstones. This has a layered sort of composition. So molecularly, if you look at how it's oriented, it's like two-dimensional sheets growing along that way and all stacked like a pile of papers, basically molecularly upwards, as you can see. Basically look like this and like this. I'm going to give a fairly accurate image rendering of the size, the proportions, the dimensionality of the original rock that I had for about 10 years or more prior to that. Basically something like this, something you could hold in the hand. Its dimensions, if I were to oversimplify it a little bit to get the technical aspects, technical dimensions of. Okay, it looked about like this from the side. No, this is almost an over thickening. It was probably even thinner than that. Looking like that. Looking like that if you were to turn it 90 degrees around. And something that looks like this from the top. Almost a very slight slice of what would be like a pyramidal kind of thing, but it might not even be that steep. It might have been more like that. This is probably a little bit more accurate, right? So that's the proportions we're looking at, all right? So, right, this object was put into a jug of milk. True and genuine reporting here. I got the higher dimensional, spiritual, or whatever you want to call it like this. We'll leave it with that description for now. Insight and instruction to take this object right here and place it right into the milk. So even though obviously the milk is very opaque, you can't really see it when it's in there, except when you're shaking around the glass or the jug, you'll see just a little bit of the outlines. And specifically, the best way to see it is when you flip it or look underneath the rounded jug. You basically see the rounded circumference just kind of touching and sliding around on the bottom there. If you were to drop a coin into it, you can imagine you'd look from underneath. You could see the one face of the coin. You shake it a little bit, you try to flip it, it'll flip to the other side of the coin. Mind you, now as we remember, let's say that this circle here is corresponding to the top portion of the circle that would be there, right? So if you then take this part underneath and you shake it, well, it was this big, but then now all of a sudden if you shake and get it to flip, it's going to become slightly bigger when it flips around, because you understand it's now the bottom part that's facing that outward where we see, right? So the game begins. It's that size, obviously. Now, by naive presumption or standard classical understanding of science, you wouldn't expect much to happen, right? So it's in there, but there's a little bit of information not yet given. Now, if you were to shake it like this, you might get it again to be like this, and then flip around and slightly smaller again. And we would basically stay like that forever, flipping it, going from one to the other, back and forth like this. But there's something else going on now. We open this up, and we pour in the contents of enzymes, broad spectrum enzymes. You'd have your amylases, the enzymes that break down the sugars, complex carbs, anything like that, disaccharides, etc., and all that. You have the lipidases breaking down the fats. You have the enzymes that also break down the proteins as well, and those are the most interesting kinds as well. We'll find out a little more, but we see that this gets opened up and we simply mix it in, and it's shaken up and reacting like this. Now we understand that when you put enzymes onto substrates, we have the proteins, the lipids, and sugars in a sense, or all three are present in the milk. What do we then find? Say now this is marked as being enzyme rich or enzyme applied milk. Similar things happen when you naturally start consuming milk. You put the milk into your stomach, your pancreas releases the enzymes. By the time it's in your small intestine, you've got all the different things working on it, breaking it down. This is a natural requirement because, again, by classical interpretation, it's understood that only small enough molecules will even pass through the barriers of the GI tract and the small intestine. You can't get large proteins any larger than about 3 to 4 amino acid units long. Apparently you can't absorb that. Okay, and there's other issues with fat absorption. It's known that people have issues with absorbing fats and lipids. You get a lot of that coming out in your stool, and the things float and all this and so on. The presumption is you didn't really get much or hardly any of it, the value of that at all. It's also why it's known that people who have pancreatic issues, enzyme production issues, they can eat a lot, but because they can't turn that matter into energy, simply saying, they don't really gain a lot of weight, and they maybe even have to eat a lot, and most of it just basically runs through them without a high utilization. Now that's a standard understanding, but we're going to find out what happens. Let's look at this classical view of what would happen if one were to put in enzymes. Anybody could do this. At the regular store, you could go to a Whole Foods and find the stuff, or Amazon or whatever, right? There's enough of it on the market supply that most people should be able to buy it. Milk, same thing. And while the dynamics might be a little bit different for the different things you might want to put in, could you try with metals? Can one try with different kinds of more valuable precious gemstones? My God, could you think of it? Rubies or whatever? Well, check this out. It might be maybe luck, sort of, or just it worked out as it happened, because the orientation of the molecules here, unlike with the other ones, you don't know how it's going to be cut, so you have imperfect or random or like chaotic rotations. Here, because you're aligning with that axis, as I mentioned earlier, everything here is going to be straight and really just running along this axis. All those molecules are, worked out in this way, if you take a look. So that has something to do possibly with the profound results regarding what we're going to see here. So it might be diminished by even an order of magnitude, possibly, if it's different. We're going to leave that up to the future and for this to be found out by the follow-up discoverers, because this is a frontier. Very few things in science are a frontier, but the interesting thing is maybe you discover a frontier where you didn't even know that there would be one, like the magician pulling out a quarter from behind your ear that you didn't even know was there. Now, returning to the matter, as you see, this is sort of labeling that this is now enzyme applied milk, it implies. So over time, as time moves forward over the minutes to hours, and largely with different phases as you get from hours into days, okay, and beyond a few days, well, then perhaps you get cheeses, right, and all that kind of thing, which is a reason why that happens. You get the whey, you get the cheese when it comes to milk, but generally everything keeps getting broken down. The idea is that eventually everything would break down to the finest components, right? Well, the belief is that it's presumed that among everything in here that's proteins, you would get all the long protein chains get simply chopped up into the finer, shorter peptide strands. Okay, among the longer chain, obviously what's understood is that you're going to have long protein chains. They're going to be broken up into the shorter peptides as time goes by. Also, the longer fatty things are going to be broken down, and also simply the same. Any sugars that are the longer, you might have even starches, which are the long ones, but principally, let's say we're dealing with disaccharides and things like this, and you get the broken down monosaccharides from them and whatever else like that, okay? That's a naive assumption. We understand that that's what the enzyme is going to be doing with the milk, you see, with this stuff. Moreover, depending on your view, depending on the observations and how you align it with the classical theories or whatever you find to be the case, there either may be no or negligible effect by the enzyme upon the rock itself here, such that, well, logically, if that item is of a certain size, let's say, that enzyme would be bound to simply, if anything, degrade it such that it becomes literally smaller, if anything, over time because of enzymatic degradation. Or alternately, if you don't believe that the enzymes would, at least by naive, it is naive theory, that there would be no significant and substantial interaction, but it'd be negligible to none at best, then you would expect that to stay just exactly the same, at the same size, right? Now, of course, we can contrast this with with what's going on within the jar or jug with what happens in the human body. People know what happens when living creatures consume food. You don't stay the same, do you? In essence, there's a hidden and either hardly discovered, borderline quasi at best discovered, nested into little pockets here and there, but they don't even really know what they have, or not really sufficiently discovered phenomena regarding what happens, the interaction between items, materials of this nature where the rock is, enzymatic involvement with other compounds in the environment, and the resulting effect. Let's consider one thing real quick. Probably I'm not going to bring up the studies, but anyone could find the studies if you look hard enough. There's the best we have regarding growth, say even monomer by monomer growth, or a little bit beyond that, would be newest level procedures and ways by which gold in plating can be grown at microscopic levels. There's no real reliable macroscopic way to do this with this, at least recently I think I came across something that says that some company found some nuclear way to do it, which could be viable maybe, but other than that we still don't have another branch of option available, right? But I remember coming across within the last year or so, or year or two, articles that clearly describe essentially that when you have these microscopic level of micro thickness of measurement here, that when they use either plasma itself, remember those plasma balls in like this, right, and or the surrounding specially put in gases of whatever kind that they need to be in order to get the specific reaction. These become plasminated, ionated gases, or it's called the state of plasma, which basically means or connotes that it's gaseous with the extra electron and some alternate configuration, right? That in this setting, basically, one could look up exactly to find what it is that happens, but, you know, step by step, and then, you know, almost seemingly magically, there appears slightly thicker layering upon these things. Still at the microscopic scale, importantly, but fascinating nevertheless. These things are observed to happen, and yet they figure it isn't really that easy to get to macroscopic. The only possible exception to this might be some cutting-edge forms of how they do lab-grown gems, the diamonds and things like this. But even those processes are not quick. It's known that they take at least many days and usually even longer, weeks, to grow things not the size of a mountain, but barely, just tiny, large enough that you can have a small stone by your finger, right? and that these lab-grown gems can't be even formed in a normal environment. You have to simulate the acceleration of the reactions necessary, so they induce the high pressure. Plasma seems to be a component of some of these processes, perhaps the newer ones. And like this, one can do research into what, and at the level of industry, they have going on. But what we're going to talk about now is a new thing that goes beyond anything that's even semi-widely known about, even in the specialized niche fields. And it's this. As you recall from 2016, when I woke up from that coma, well, just to say, life told me through my own neural network altered configuration by the research chemicals that the crystals grow in this specific way. I stumbled upon the certain papers, drew the connections, and like I said earlier, started developing understandings that ran in accordance with reality, but at a diagonal angle compared to what everybody else understood about any of this. So then, what does this leverage up? Finally, the culmination moment in 2023, when I had the vision open up and I received the communication from on high. Oh yeah, telling me that I was going to observe something supernatural seeming happen. That the purpose of this was to facilitate something. I refer to what this is in other videos, but for here we'll keep it largely at this physical level. But in short, I was told that this rock shown here with the dimensions given here in this illustration would grow. That the ion complexes are actually made available through this is the big secret of all now, through the enzymatic reaction of your common things that you eat. That if you take those powders, sell them, you could buy them as supplements, mix them with the things like the milks, anything, juice, fruit juice. Although sealed fruits are preloaded with the negative ions, but even regardless of that, people resort to plasminating the gases to get a little bit of this effect, thinking that that's the best way we've got. It's not the best way we've got. You're not growing your shit in the specially prepared milk. That hasn't occurred to anybody yet on Earth. But we're about to reveal the real godly secrets. You will see what it means. Prophetically, perhaps. We continue. Could this really be possible? We're going to find out. So when this originally was conveyed to me as something to bear as a hypothesis, shall we say, at the time being, although my hunch, we'll call it, conveyed that it was an inevitability that it would form this way. But at the surface level, my assumption was, okay, if I were to try this and place this object within this container, that, focus on this one, the bottom one here is the right, that's just about right. That this, in essence, or if I just hold it like this, right, that it's going to hold like this, and that because it's growing, essentially it's going to be doing this. It's going to have the same dimensions and become somehow larger, that all three spatial dimensions are going to increase in the same way, right? Makes sense. It's a good standard, maybe a little naive assumption, but it's the first thing anyone would think. So I figure, okay, then the enzymes are applied as we have marked here. So there's something happening. Now I'll also tell you, when I woke up from that 2016 coma as the acquired savant syndrome man, one of the things I could feel well is energy. But this isn't special to me. There's a few things I can perceive and pick up that exceeds what normal people can pick up, but everybody has a more basic version of many or most of my special capabilities, if you want to call it that way. So regular people, many of them, I would even say, have at least a partial ability to feel and perceive the same things I'm describing. With enough experimentation and subtle testing, you could sort of feel the energies. It's akin to, the best way I could put it is, it's akin to the ability to read whether or not the fruit at the fruit store, when you put your hand one by one, you can feel which fruit is right versus not right. Some human beings have this ability very clearly. Others don't, which is interesting. It's all just the same. You don't read anything. But for those of us who could read the fruit apart, it's basically this. It's picking up the signal of what's going on inside correctly, right? So you could get attuned with the energies. There used to be an old Italian saying, I think, that the woman who knows how to pick good fruit well also knows how to pick people well. Any human being can pick another person well or read them or pick a good spouse like this. They find that by association, the ones who do well at this seem to have a good ability to pick fruit as well at the market. Well, it's not a joke. It actually all aligns well. It's the perceptive capacity. You feel the energy, you read what's going on in life, you know where to move, where to go. Now, looking at this, I was given the hunch to not just leave this on the table, on the ground. No, there had to be something else that was added to the equation. Believe it or not, and my hypothesis also is, and a little bit of my follow-up experimentation also confirmed that if you do leave this just in isolation on a table, on a lab shelf or something and walk away, even, yes, with these enzymes, as is labeled, they're in now, they're active, and people, the classic standard models don't have a specific finding that there's an electron bath happening here at this time. Well, I want to be careful with my words that I'm speaking accurately, but say call it ion complexes, ion bath, ion complex bath. There's something happening here, okay? And after the initial minutes, really, there's this thing happening. When you touch the glass, if it's very well sealed plastic, it will seal in the ions, electrons, and energy much more effectively, which will hamper your ability as a human being to be able to read it from the outside by feel if you are both of the apt fruit feeling subset of human beings and well, if it's made of glass, there's a very small proportion of these that are transmitted out that you could read it and feel it by your human hands. If you have your neurology kind of lined up right as well. So what does this mean? This is going to lead into my next point. Even if you have this enzymatic reaction happening now, it's going to look like this for a little while because, believe it or not, this is not official standard textbook stuff, but the fact of an increase of the quote-unquote amount, okay, of this effect, essence, and matter/energy basically happening here. This is not the standard thing, but this is a byproduct of the enzymatic reaction that is understood, not understood enough. So let's say in the initial minutes to hours, you have a lot of this. And by the way, there's another secret, that it happens to be milk. If you take the alternative, hey, fruit juice and apple juice, you pour that in a container, you might be able to have, there's not fats and there's not proteins in there, but you have your simple sugars and disaccharides, or your fructose even. In fact, it's a little challenging because, again, looking at it naively, an enzyme shouldn't even be able really to break down a monosaccharide. You think naively, fructose is the most basic monosaccharide. So what would the enzyme break that down to? Apparently, that's just simply small enough that we figure the release of insulin internally allows you biologically, physiologically to open up through the insulin-induced reaction your membranes of your cells, which is fascinating, that you can intake the monosaccharides just such that internally there's some further mysterious process internally, intracellularly that's taking place, that's somehow then converting that to the vital energy you need. And there's basic theories, and yet we believe we understand most of it, and yet we underestimate how much less of the reality we know than what we think we know. This really gets interesting. We continue. But with the case of the fruit juice, where it's just water, when it's water, and especially when it's water with a glass and not plastic, the rate at which the Well, for the first surprise is that despite it being a monosaccharide in the case of like a simple fruit juice and fructose like that, it's still the case that you get these ions and ion complexes to result, the energies. Okay? A rough approximation or a rough analogy would be, hey, you know, when you take antioxidants, they're of value to you in the system because they have the excess negative ion, which is the excess. Right? The positive ion corresponds to the, not the surplus, but it's too short of it, right? Again, that's basically speaking. So it's the extra of the ion that helps us borrow that contribution and use it wherever we need to when we have a shortage of that in the human body. And that helps keep the homeostasis and upregulate the things and improve the health, right? Is the idea. So, surprise number one, even your fruit juice, of course. But your body makes use of it. Don't you grow when you drink fruit juice every day? Right. We know something's happening that involves a conversion of, watch, not just this stuff to energy, but this stuff to, well, you will literally grow larger as a human being. Why does this happen? People haven't fully figured it out. We're cutting through the deep truths here. We're putting it now in a way where it's not ever really been figured, and with the right experimentation, people can figure it out for yourselves or experience and observe these things, and what you will see simply is not fully explained or accounted for by the standard and classical explanations of how these scientifically understood processes work. Something's falling short. Now let's return to this. What's interesting about the milk here is that unlike most other compounds, the milk, because it's rich in fats that do not separate from the water component, because of this, and only milk has this. Very few things in this world allow for fats to maintain in the same phase with the watery portion of the fluid. And goat milk in particular is known even to separate less quickly than that. Cow's milk separates. So assume even this is goat milk. But because the fat is there, people, you know, fat is like insulation. Well, let me tell you, for this process here, while a plastic container also is very good for insulation, although then you don't want to degrade the plastic if you're drinking it or whatever, but the milk, ironically, itself, in all the respective places and the volume of it, keeps the overall totality of the ions and ionic energy, should we say, basically, more contained for longer. So with fruit juice, you keep it, but then it dissipates quickly, and then a new phenomenon takes place, which we'll talk about shortly. But with milk, like if you take the integral of what the density is of this stuff over time, as time continues, it grows way higher and stays up for longer. But now returning to what we were saying earlier. So imagine you put this on the shelf just like that. It seems that these ions will bounce around, and yes, people, they will contribute slightly, and depending how much acuity you have in your nervous system, there's people could feel almost microscopic changes on the border between macroscopic and microscopic. You could still feel, if you have extremely high, maybe supernatural proprioceptive capacity like me, or other insightful people will still feel very small changes if you're very well attuned, but there might not be very much. However, there's something new, something more that's happening, because I also got the feeling that what needed to happen in addition to this, let's consider now something. We all know that the human body, and you know, almost everything that's alive in essence, has what we term an electromagnetic field. People in different circles sort of conflate this or hold it to be basically what one's aura is. We've seen pictures of Kirlian photography that seemingly capture some of this electromagnetic radiation and visualize it. It's interesting. But it doesn't necessarily need to be visualized one way or another, but you understand it's present. It's literally there, which comes out as a result of whatever consequences that produce these electromagnetic fields around individuals, around living things. So the missing component, the secret seemed to be to ensure that for the whole time, and I'm talking hours of holding this, making flush, direct, strong contact with the human hand, gripping this jar. And we'll show exactly how he did it and how he figured to do it. That seemingly the electromagnetic field that comes out, the electromagnetic field that comes from the human body somehow introduces some sort of, shall we call it, coarse graining, orienting, aligning effect, some kind of constraining or forcing and mobilizing effect, such that the presence of the release of the ions and ion complexes during this window period of time, combined with the fact of the electromagnetic field being applied and transmitted unto all this, then begins to have the new effect. And we're going to simply show basically what the idea is, or seemingly is. Okay, it's that more clear. You have the item or the crystal. You have a volume of whatever solution around, let's say, generally speaking, one side of this item, where that solution, that fluid, is also enzymatically activated in order to allow for the release of ion complexes, ions, negative charges, it gets more complex than that. But this is the basics, and this is the stuff that people weren't fully aware of, where you also then have the application of whatever it is, a human mass, some living thing, that also has electromagnetism, where it seems that because of the presence of that electromagnetic flux, it is because of this, and largely this, that the ions here, instead of neutrally, randomly bouncing around and whatever, then become coerced almost magnetically or electromagnetically to begin to become driven or attracted this way, very importantly. And now once you have that, where this matter here is pre-existing, and these energies, charges, or whatever you want to call it, are interacting within the mass lattice, if you will, of whatever's presented here, that is where you begin to have the crystallization by particle attachment phenomenon that's described or alluded to, but only to the partial extent that we found from papers starting from 10 years ago. There's maybe been a little bit of advancement since then in the published white papers, but not to this extent. Now let's go back to what the hunch was, say, right? That this thing here, because of one in my position holding the thing, the container from the bottom, with the enzymes working at the top and all this, would induce this to grow out that way. And perhaps, again, I'll mention one more time, it might be because the convenient orientation is preset from nature, that they're all aligned that way, flat and straight, perpendicular to the other things aligned in the stack of the things. It might be different if it's other items, but maybe not that different. You get me? But because of this, the original assumption was that. Okay, so if I'm shaking this thing around and looking from the bottom of the container as I'm shaking it, flipping it around inside, it's a little awkward to flip the object like this on the inside, the coin-like thing with the slight, very slight taper. But what my expectation was that if it's going to grow over the course of even the coming few hours, and I figured that a few hours would be all I would need in order to see whether the thing as I would perceive it would be viable macroscopically and practically applicationally viable enough that this is worth even talking about or showing to other people, or not? That it's little more than roughly as good as what the other processes that leading scientists figured out so far. I would expect to see that regardless of whether I'm flipping it intermittently to show the one circle side, or whether you see it with, let's say, the other side like that, right? That as I'm continuing to flip, and either you get the one larger one exposed, or you get then the smaller ones. It's going to oscillate from one to the other, from one to the other. But over the course of time, if it's really quote unquote magically seemingly growing at macroscopically appreciable rates, which would be unbelievable, and automatically just based on this would rival the leading systems that we have in industry to be able to grow, gems at accelerated rates or whatever. So you'd expect to see, let's say what we have up here is later, is that both the top end and the bottom end or face of that circular would both start being larger, and the smaller one would still also be larger, right? And then you'd keep seeing that all of them are, again, then the smaller one is even larger. They're both getting larger, okay? But what do we actually find? Here's the first surprise to the naive assumption, but one which ironically reinforces the fact that what we have actually seen is true gem crystal growth. You heard it here first on Tisha B'Av 2025. There's a reason why humanity's being given this now. You will be shown soon. So, the format was applied. Here's the turning point in the narrative. Did we actually see observable change? I will tell you exactly what I saw. Sworn on my life, but you won't need to take my word for it. I am finally, for the first time, 2 years after this originally happened, I'm revealing it to everybody. You're all going to be able to see this magic unfold in your lives. Let's take a look. Imagine you're in my position, you're doing this. Something compels you to move in this way. Other things were brought down informationally too. They correspond to what's here, but we'll focus on the scientific physical side for now. Okay, resuming the recording. You're looking to see if there's any observable change that would manifest at any of either the smaller side when your milk solution flipped to that, enzymatic milk, versus the larger side. Okay, you're eyeballing it, basically. You're not drunk and you have good vision. You could see pretty well, if even over the course of an hour or hours, even minutes, if there's changes, or whether there's this is largely fruitless or not substantially the thing. Here's what we ended up finding. After about some time, you could say an hour, 2 hours, 3 hours like this. Yeah, no, it's not just illusion. Oh my God. At least that bottom, broader, larger circle disc measurement and side, where it was, let's say, this large when starting, then suddenly became slightly larger. And then a little bit later, very slightly larger still, just like that. But here's what's funny, because where the bottom larger size seemed to be growing larger, something else seemed to also be happening at the same time, which contradicted the initial surface level expectation one would have. It's that the smaller top disc wasn't getting larger, nor was it staying the same. That smaller disc that we were seeing, that one was getting very slightly smaller. And then after hours still, very slightly smaller again. And it's so wild to get to experience this in your hands as you're watching this, because quote unquote, this shouldn't be possible God tells you what's possible and how the place really works. The larger side started getting larger. The smaller side started getting smaller. Of course, it doesn't take that much ingenuity or insight to figure that, indeed, why is this happening? It's simply because this object here, while perhaps there may have been very outward expansions along any of this kind of direction or axes, right? No, the real thing, primarily and principally, was that the interaction of the electromagnetic field, the ion complexes from the enzymatically degrading solution, and all this, and the order, and the precise setup, which is amazing, and with the glass and all this, made it so that over the course of only a couple to a few hours, we ended up seeing added material continuing like that. By the time I finished this experiment, after my eyes, after it was no longer attributable to delusion of visual anything, that's a little over exaggerating how it ended up being as a final thing, but you get the idea. I then removed the object from the opaque milk and found it. I had that rock for 10 years. It was just like on my shelf, but I handled it. You know the size. When you see something that's both a certain weight, has certain three-dimensional topological configuration and ratios, you know what you're holding. If something you bought at the store, you had for 10 years that you're handling, even, you know, not even semi-regularly, but you're handling it, and then you're taking a look at it, all of a sudden it changes shape and size and configurations and proportions too. People, more convincing than someone holding out an object and saying it got exactly the same ratios but bigger, anyone could go and say, yeah, maybe you're just zooming too close or too hard. Maybe you're delusional. No. When it grows this way and becomes something else, that you can't explain. This, halfway to a pyramid, was not, ladies and gentlemen, this. See that? That was flat and thin. With the relative angle, with this proportionality and that angle, back to pulling it like this. My conservative estimate is that within a few hours, and with extremely, relatively speaking, cheap, the enzymes are basically cheap, lowest order pricing, and imagine something like this on an industrial scale, and imagine something like this done with even further insight than the basics I'm putting forth now. See, my role is to, I have a couple aspects of a mission I'm fulfilling here. At this time, wasn't going to be revealed any sooner. So I've been sitting on this for a little while, but now is the time to reveal it. Why? You will see. But firstly, well, the cost is low. Milk, and it seems to be the most effective with milk for a number of reasons, which we'll get into. But the milk, the electromagnetic applied thing, you can use your human hand to do it, but then I'm sure science, before very long, that'll be all up to you, because you will all go crazy trying to figure out how to grow your gemstones and your precious gold, which you will, and you will succeed at this at rates large enough that this will fundamentally change the entire world extremely quickly, like this. This is being revealed for the first time here on Earth by me. It's August 2025. You've not heard anything before now about this validly that you can test and live the reality and the truth of. At least 30 or 35% of an increase of mass of this object was attained within only a few hours. As if vaporized from heaven, from magic from the sky. The matter the material, the molecules of this specific compound, or the compounds in this extended crystalline thing, did not exist in physical manifestation. Before this happened. With the presumption or the understanding that this could be verified, recreated to enough of an extent that you could figure it out, let's then go back and revisit some of the other key sort of hidden tells within this whole reality that we live in and the world around us, to see what else, if this is true, and it is, what else around us then all along has been hiding components of these physics secrets, never before combined in this way until right now. Now, here's also what's even more interesting. So, naturally on this earth, you see that there's caves with crystals growing all up inside them, and everywhere in nature, everything that's a rock, everything that's like this, basically is a solidified crystal of sorts, whether amorphous or crystalline in the traditional sense, right? The crystals can be essentially homogeneous, largely, and they're clean like that, or stones like this can have various compatible, the crystalline lattice framework, they're compatible so that it's comprised of multiple different things. So the lepidolite or mica is known, it isn't always purplish like this, but it's known to be particularly rich in lithium. These are basically like high lithium containing stones. These are processed for their lithium often to have them extracted, as far as I understand, right? So let's revisit the standard classical or naive frameworks, which say that, heck, even if this magic seeming crystallization by particle attachment phenomenon that's been referred to sporadically here and there within the white papers and wherever else in the research for the last 10 years or so or more, nevertheless, is it the case that the atoms that are yielded within whatever the excess marginally grown new, so to speak, layers of attachment, right? Do they form because the constituent atoms of that compound are already pre-made available from the surrounding molecules in the solution, let's say, right? If you're growing it in a beaker or in a high pressure thing, growing the lab grown gems or whatever, people, the way the best systems of those are set up is that they're still limited to, firstly, you needing a piece of the actual thing to seed the growth. Then when you have the growth, it's a seeming understanding, whether they're doing the plasma or whatever, that basically you need the right stuff already pre-existing in the fluids or solutions, and with that, and the gases, whatever. So even that framework seems to carry implicitly at least the belief of such a constraint, that, as according to the science that we regard, you can't invent the atoms totally anew in that way, right? So let's say this is a stone and it's got the patches of just high lithium or even pure lithium. It is extremely light, this stone. So, you know, lithium is lighter than oil. Oil floats on water and lithium floats on oil, which is profoundly amazing. So these particular ones are extraordinarily light for that reason, because it's not microscopic amounts of lithium, it's literally the lithium, basically, like mixed in there. There's visual patches you could pretty much see. So as the thing grows, macroscopically appreciable like this, people, here's the revelation. in the milk that created that much extra, where if you then like flake off the thing, because with this one it's kind of brittle, you can flake off the layers as it happens. It's amazing how things get set up by happenstance in this life. Oh yeah. Well, when I then go and flake it apart, it's a natural growth of whatever the pre-grown pattern of all the natural blemishes and things, whatever were. The growth would just continue to honor that in the constraint flow going with it. It's extending what was there as it grew on, which is amazing. And then you realize, wow. So then the final thing is, if this is made up of, you know, whatever minerals and elements, was it literally taking and ripping pre-existing, you know, phosphorus atoms or ions, but with the whole of the phosphorus, or the needing to take exactly from the things? In other words, where the added surplus lithium was grown, you were to chip it off and weigh it or purify it somehow, the amount of lithium that's sitting there, that much lithium, people, was not in the milk you just had. You don't have that much lithium sitting in the milk. People, the electrons, basically, or the ions, however you want to call it, and ultimately it's all energy once you really get down to the deepest levels of the physics involved here within this universe. It's all energy, right? It just reforms to become the thing it's growing into. You didn't need the original thing in the solution to make more of the underlying crystalline supersaturate upon which you're seeking to make growth on. That's the big revelation, people. And where it wasn't realized necessarily prior till now, this is now bridging the gap between science and alchemy. You're basically going to become essentially unified, more or less. This is what the human body's been doing all along. We draw in foods into the core of our being, so that when the contact is made with the enzymes, it creates these super rich, and it's already encased within our electromagnetic being, so it automatically starts shooting and sending the ion complexes everywhere, and you instantaneously start growing everywhere. That's the true dynamic. Basically, pretty much something mostly like this, which is a significant or substantial departure from the prior understanding, a limited one, of how science has figured till now might be going on, what's really going on with growth of life and matter and material. Here it is. So what we're going to do now is we're going to start explaining other things that we have found taking place observably or reportedly in nature. And we're going to see if we can explain and account for really what's going on in this world. Firstly, we have a very high abundance of things on this planet, which in a sense have really astounded us. There's so much gases in the air, all these breathable oxygen, nitrogen, and everything else. You have a ton of water on the planet, and you have all this land and the things. Where did all of this come from? And moreover, really, what's the better and more complete explanatory and causal model for why you really have so much of this? Let's consider. So it occurred to me before long that essentially, if ions and ion complexes are the source of growth upon, at the very least, already nucleated supersaturates, shall we say, that this must be because there's something magnetic or electromagnetic happening regarding the interaction of those ions and the pre-existing alignment of the non-chaotic but now highly ordered crystal lattice, where it causes or induces, perhaps electromagnetically, anything that comes as a potential donor to immediately reconfigure itself in essence, such that it literally just becomes that new thing, almost spontaneously, basically. Okay? Now, what phenomenon do we have going on the Earth that could be a regular contributor to the growth of things? Anything, really. Let's consider. We have various metal ores in the ground that we discover. You have gold deposits. You have these veins or whatever, deposits of gold growing all throughout here and there. Now look at the ground. When you discover these golden ores and sometimes nearly pure gold and to various concentrations, you find that they're there. They're arranged in precisely the way that they're naturally arranged, and they cluster in the specific places in the ground that they cluster. There's something we can consider then as being electromagnetically rich, ionically rich, where for whatever reason the seed of gold formed or is more highly likely to form for whatever reason. And regarding the seeding, that could be a different topic. That could be due to forces a little bit beyond the confines of what this is about. What creates that first gold atom to sit there, or the first physical cluster of atoms to begin with? People theorize everything, that it came from the stars, or the sun made it, or other forces, high pressure, molten lava and other things make it so that spontaneously there will just arise these things. And the truth is a little bit more complex than that, as we may add on different angles and assessments, right? We'll give a little bit of a hint. Anybody can Google about microwaving silica and spontaneously yielding gold. There's some doctor who became well known enough in those semi-fringe circles that he was doing this, and people at an industrial level started doing it with consistent success and just reported about for years now. This is not new. 10, 20 years or more. Close to 30 years. So there you have it, for a generation or longer now. So it's not so much a secret or a cover-up, right? Then, if that's possible, if it's possible to induce the spontaneous creation of the seeding where we didn't even really have gold before, or maybe it was microscopic in the silica on the brown glass beer bottles to begin with, but at that point, once it's there and it exists, it seems that if you contribute some added solution, let's say water, somehow that also contains these some source of electrons and ions, well, where would we get that from? Obviously, every time there's a thunderstorm. Because from the very beginnings of how this earth worked, due to how the atmospheric things work on this planet, we have thunderstorms as a regular occurrence all over the world, everywhere. Because of this, because of that smell that you smell, but it's just a regular rainstorm, there's not hardly any of that or as much, and then when it's a thunderstorm, it's overwhelming, especially if you have a good nose, you feel it and you sense it. We've all experienced those subtle differences with a strong thunderstorm, and when that thunderstorm water rains on you, it's got a different effect on your skin, doesn't it, when compared to the regular seeming rain, the way your skin softens. There's other things too. With an extremely strong sense of smell, you can discover that things that had a very subtle smell, all of a sudden, after it's rained on and then dries again, has a much stronger smell. So if there's some compound that exists at such a microscopic level where our noses are good enough to smell, if there's just several molecules or more it will trigger a reception, but it also goes by concentration. Now all of a sudden something can smell multiple times more strongly. The answer is that there's an increase in the number of molecules of that specific aromatic substance, whether it's a pheromone or some other specific smell causing thing of the planet anywhere. If you can increase the number of molecules present in a localized place that by that large of an extremity, just because it rained once from the thunderstorm a little bit, that's the same reason why enzymatically activated milk, just a little contact and a little shake with the right ordering and the right other conditions applied, in hours you get it growing almost half the size extra added on top. It's the same thing. No one's told this to you before, you humans. So let's consider now the new and refined model of why we find amethyst crystals organized in these deposits in the rocks in the caves and like this. It's all because the preceded spaces, volumes, gases, atmospheric things, etc., are all preceded with the right capacity to add on these electric forces, so to speak, basically. Where due to these underlying forces, it just adds on and it changes and becomes the new thing because of the existence of the fact that it's already as a crystalline solid thing, a solid within the, say, the liquid or the pool of gases. Here's something even more interesting. If you were to take all the amount of gases and molecules, it piles for miles and miles up into the atmosphere. Why is this? Here's an interesting thing. When gas molecules are dissolved in water and fluids, they are dissolved much like things that would otherwise be solid if you distilled away. They are also dissolved, like sugars in water, right? It could be sugar crystals or it's dissolved in the water. Same with gases. Dissolves the same way. So imagine and realize when you remove the water in the fluid, the gases, when they are in the air form, here's a technical fact that most people don't realize. The gas in the air you're breathing, in that form, they are technically gaseous crystals. Right. They're not dissolved in water, but they're sitting, so to speak, quote unquote, dry in the ether. This, believe it or not, has tremendous implications. Why? Because if you have thunderstorms with these gigantic, almost cosmic level, planetary level, gigantic thunderstorms with the shocks and the lightning and all this voltage and whatever, if what's floating around are technically dry in the ether floating gas atoms and compounds, just being near to take people, when it thunderstorms for miles around, everyone can smell the air. So that whole bathing in the ions is not just right there, it's everywhere all at once. You can imagine at the microscopic level when that thunderstorm, let's say, or that thunderstorm rich, water rich river flows through that creek where those ores are, just by passing by and floating by and moistening the soil there. You can imagine you've got added molecular layers, probably right there measurable by microscope and easily rivaling or exceeding we could get in the lab nowadays with the existing technology. Then, yeah, it's a slow process. It could be thousands or tens of thousands or even millions of years to get cave full of crystals. But to hold it in your hand like this, every time it's raining, it's working. Possibly the Earth itself having its own magnetic field is correspondingly analogous to how it is that when your magnetic field comes in and touches, let's say, the milk jug while you're doing this thing. It all has all parts of the equation present. Okay? Now, the final question is, you could do this to this. Can you do this to just about anything else? The answer is seemingly yeah. And I'm going to leave this up to all of the rest of you, because everybody wants a piece of the potential ramifications of this. If there's no limit to being able to grow at macroscopically significant rates, these things, well, it's funny how this corresponds to the biblical promise. For it was stated in some Abrahamic religions that where prophecy of the future Jerusalem is seen, it's all about how there's crystals there that are so grown gigantic, it is as if the whole gate was chiseled from one pearl and the whole street was just one sheet of crystal and whatever it is, or the gold and the ruby and this. That's the future we're inheriting. This is what's coming. If we can grow the gold in the ground naturally through the occasional thunderstorms, can you imagine how much quicker you can grow the gold if you, especially if you had it seeded correctly? Maybe if it's either pure, might be one circumstance and potentiality. It's all, you can all check it out and find out. On the other hand, you have natural gold, which maybe occurs at about up to 80-90%, but it's it has a different look. It actually looks like a flaky crystal, right? And it has quartz and other things, or it can attach to quartz, just like silica and beer bottles seem to be able to form nuggets of gold if you microwave them. It's also true that gold naturally is found paired and bonded to silica a lot. So there may be some clever way to stack and orient the silica bounded gold such that when you layer it with the human hand, or you just turn on some device that mimics human and living electromagnetism by amping up maybe a plasma ball or some other magnets and whatever. Now, come on, the Teslas and Einsteins of today, whoever they are, with this insight about the enzymes and all this, should be running along, and now we're gonna have an explosion of amazing new things happening like this. All right? So what's next? It's that the gold, you're gonna be able to grow it real quick. What are my own results, by the way? This is very important. We're gonna get into something that's the next part of the puzzle here. So I have had results indicate to me the following pattern, and this has been very consistent. Okay, let's say this is a graph and this is time like this, okay? And that this is where the size of the object should be. Now, standard, it would never move, and yet magically we have it going up. From everything that you've heard, you might assume that, especially with the milk and the fatty insulation and layering, and or the plastic is even better than the glass, that it's just going to go up, 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 and that it's just, there's no end, it's going to grow forever. That's also a little bit of a trick or a trap. Here's what actually happens. I remember hearing once a certain doctor, I think he passed away a few years ago, invented some things. He was known for his research on crystals and water, and he created a couple products, I think Mega Hydrate and Crystal Energy and other things. Pat Flanagan, right? And remember him explaining on a video very well. He became interested in selling a particular form of hydrogen or something that would promote the ionized added, like an H negative, which is a rare and beneficial for the body, this form of hydrogen. I speculate that this is possibly a byproduct of what actually happens enzymatically. I don't know for sure, but what's important is this. He said that the problem with most antioxidants, as he's figured, and this might be scientifically backed, is that in some sense, physiologically and biologically, when you apply the antioxidant, most other antioxidants, which are not, as he found it to be, the H-, it then ends up being the case that the antioxidants, ironically or paradoxically, promote at one level the immediate giving and surplus of the electron or the energy or the charge, but then as a result of the downstream reduction or whatever it is, it then ends up that there's it's the opposite effect, right? And that most antioxidants seemingly do this, and the body's very complex machinery is all about smartly kind of managing that process, we'll put basically, right? So the implications of that are that it's a little bit of a double-edged sword, or that you get the benefit, but then it's like a whipsaw and it goes the other way. Well, that's the best rough analogy I have to what is being experienced with this. Here's what actually happens. You will first find, as you're trying to grow these things, that it will grow, let's say the volume is up to like whatever higher level of percent, where this is the baseline, okay? But as you keep leaving it exposed in the enzyme-rich solution, and by the way, there's different implications as well for when you, whether you keep the enzymes active infinitely or whether you boil them to denature them at any given point. And applying heat to the system also is beneficial. I've experimented a little bit with adding heat, with doing different densities, different foodstuffs. By the way, we find out that with different foodstuffs, you will induce different types of tissues to grow as a result, and different other aspects. It's so profoundly interesting, and along different directional axes of the crystal body, whatever it is. And by crystal at this point, I mean anything solid. Okay? Your muscles are sort of crystal, your nails are crystal. What ends up happening is that eventually, especially you have the enzymes continuing to be active, the charges don't stay with the surplus, negative, beneficial surpluses. No, instead, it goes not only back down to baseline, no, it's not that either. It actually goes below and shrinks. You've all heard the cases of how they make like shrunken heads. I mean, we're talking shrunken heads. We're talking it stays the baseline, then grows bigger. You think you're growing something to infinity, but then will go the other way. Okay, and then in some cases it will stay like this for a long, long while, or it'll recorrect, slowly converge back to this based on perhaps, I don't know, whatever the environmental balances of charges and factors are. So it seems that the sizes of things are following these kinds of new laws, if you will, right? And you will find this to be the case. How? So, for example, back up here with the original glass that we were holding, right? Here's what's interesting. And you don't even need it to be the milk, but probably with the milk and a little patience, you could get it with the enzymes to show. But I'll tell you that you could get it to show even with a regular juice thing. So, try this. Go buy a regular glass container of juice at the store, like an organic juice at like a Whole Foods or whatever, one of those, the brands that are there. And with your hand, if you have a high level of proprioception, let's say if you're one of like the top few percenters of people with like really good acuity of tact and the feeling, and like this, then you're going to be among those who perceive it. Apparently not all people are, somewhat surprisingly, but whatever. You're going to find this, that if you open up that juice, or maybe if you're handling the same glass bottles all day, and like you know the size in your sleep by instinctively, and you hold the same one, then you're going to take one, you're going to simply open up the cap, you could spit in it because your saliva is rich in the amylase already, and in fact probably from my own experimentations, it seems that the amylase and the spit, whatever it contains beyond that, it's so biologically potent that in some cases it actually outperforms the powders you can add from when you get it that way, right? But you know, if you get the enzymes from a good brand, and there's good brands that are known about, you could do your own research. You know, put some mix of a large amount of your spit plus the added enzyme powder, even if you'd like. You put it into the juice, and then you seal the top. You shake it really vigorously, and for the juice, you may only have to wait, I don't know, about 10 minutes, 30 minutes, an hour, 2 hours, and then it goes into tiers where it might peak out depending on the concentration of the sugar in the thing, depending on the concentration of enzyme you put in, right? It might be the case that you get it to spike out in 12 to 18 hours or in 3 hours. You see what I'm saying? So you need to ride it at the right window. When you ride it at the right window, it will be beyond microscopic. The effect will be so large that your hands will feel as if you are now suddenly holding, if you pick up that same glass bottle, that you are holding a glass bottle that was, let's say, one size, and all of a sudden it's just very slightly bigger, or whatever bigger would look like on the screen. You can feel it. You can feel it, and it's like surprising to your senses. You're going like, oh, that definitely is bigger. That's unbelievable. Consequently, when you keep it like that, and you go on for, usually it's a number of days, you're going to end up here. You're going to end up picking that up again, and now instead of being up here where it was bigger, you're going to hold it and you're going to say, no, now it's smaller than it was when it's standard at the store when you pick it up. What is going on? It's exactly this. It seems to be some kind of double swapping, ordering, that it's first the growing, and then if it stays, it will seem to decay backwards again, and it needs to like self-compensate in this way. So the trick seems to be this then, people. If you want to consistently grow the thing, you need to ride out, measure, get to the peak, and as soon as you're at the peak, you cut off. That solution is no longer good. You dump the solution, and you get fresh new enzyme with fresh new solution to start again, so that you're not experiencing the whipsawing here, basically. You see that? If you have some kind of ordered system like this, you can turn this industrial. And perhaps pairing the microwave created gold, and there's stuff all over the internet about that for a long time now, so this isn't like super new that it's controversial or whatever. Or just get regular gold, or buy it if you'd like. Or maybe gold's not the quickest thing to grow. In fact, because of how many atoms, or rather how many electrons are in the atom of gold, right, that probably means that it takes that much more of the drawing of the ion complexes to form an additional atom of gold. You might be able to grow lithium much more quick, right? Which is why maybe the mica shot up that much quicker. Okay, so there's a little hint. So what's going to happen then is you're going to start to see this effect everywhere. You're going to see it everywhere. You will even see it, if you're perceptive enough, with your own teeth. You see, your teeth are also crystals, and they're embedded into your jaw, where you have your whole, they're attached to your whole body. So you have the electromagnetic base emanating through. So guess what? If you put this juice or the milk and you enzyme activate it and put it into whatever it is, you could do the same with solid foods, with sauces, with anything like this, except instead of just eating it first, you keep it in the container of glass, which largely keeps the stuff in for a long time. Plastic does it better, but whatever. And then at some point when you're at that peak, when you take that electron, it feels glowing, and when you attune your energy, you really feel that it's different. You'll be able to start reading these things blindly, right? For many of you, possibly. Then you will sip that. As soon as you sip it, you're going to feel your teeth instantly grow. And I'm talking in 5, 10, 15 seconds. Your teeth will grow longer. Your teeth, you will get sharper, because as it's growing along the axes, it will sharpen formerly rounded parts of the tooth shape, which is unbelievable and a confirmatory thing. It makes them longer. And also, depending at what stage this is, and also what food was the basis, it will induce growth for different axes. So some foodstuffs, let's say some certain type of juice or certain type of food, only gets you to elongate the tooth down that one axis, and your teeth won't grow wider, and the shape of your face won't suddenly grow wider. Other ones will grow them wider, but hardly longer. Others will do both. And also, it seems to matter how long you have the enzyme reaction. So if you're on this curve here, and maybe you're here, it's going to have one effect. It will tend to make it longer in the earlier parts. Then when you keep it going, up here, it's great at making it wide. These are all data points. You need to start paying attention, because the future world is growing things spontaneously with crystals. We're going to have like sheets of gold formed from, quote unquote, basically nothing. So it's really important to just realize it's the ions, basically, that have been growing the entire world around you, the crystals in the caves, to the number of gas molecules floating in the air and atmosphere above us and around us. Possibly with ice being a crystal, there's some dynamic regarding how the ice is seeding in the water, and you'll get different or extra water. And beyond this, it gets even cooler, because your own brain, your cognitive acuity also interplays somehow, I have found, with these dynamics. So we'll give one more interesting inspiration for you guys to try. Okay? Oh, and by the way, before we get really further, I'm going to say this. Okay? So I've experimented with different combinations of things, and one of the interesting things is to find regarding stuff that's still liquid and fluid based solution. Of the fluid based solutions, you can figure up which ones, drawn from nature or whatever, seem to have the highest kind of general level and strata of the potency to be able to give off that number of electrons and ion volume, ion donation magnitude over the course of this whole thing. Well, the most interesting thing is that, it seems perhaps by no coincidence that when a human being drinks milk, among all the fluids you could be drinking, milk seems to be the thing that makes the human body grow the most, right? People say and attribute that there must be because of the hormones and things like this. Largely, it's simply because, and the former calorie counting systems are not completely perfectly correct or accurate, how they were formed by burning and counting the energy like that. A slightly more nuanced understanding is to figure actually what that, if you could figure out a way to measure the ionic release, so to speak, which has been largely overlooked, energy, quote unquote, or whatever, every time you cleave one of the bonds enzymatically. Now, milk is a whole bunch of real long proteins and fats, so the fats keep the energy contained, so it keeps accumulating. With the milk and the fat, you tend to have the effect where, see, with juice, it's it'll go down real quick like this, But the beautiful thing is that with the milk, kind of stays higher and longer. Right? Maybe later it goes down or something. It's a little trickier and different, but that's amazing because you're getting more area under the curve here and all that, right? So the milk's really good. But there's one more thing that tops out the milk. Because the milk is still liquid and it's able to accommodate more solutes thrown in. And it seems that of everything that you could put in, that the most beneficial thing is anything sweet. We're talking like, and I don't work with sugar cubes, seem to have a weird energetic effect. I can't describe why. It just does something weird. So when I've done this with the sugar cubes and that sugary powder that you buy, the regular cane sugar, something is not right by my own finding. Perhaps you guys can figure it out. But now when we're talking things like honey, date syrup, and the like, that's good. So there you have it. It ends up being, when we add honey, when we add things that are the congealed, condensed substances, I guess, that crystallize themselves, and you fill it up almost to the point of supersaturation within the fluid of the milk, you have, in the physics of it, topped out what grants you naturally the highest level of growth for a fluid remaining solution. Milk and honey. The density of the ions that you're going to get from milk with honey is the highest possible almighty Alpha and Omega God. But intuitively, it makes sense why. The only thing I would add to this would be, instead of adding just the regular powdered enzymes, that you always keep it with your saliva. You can add the saliva by spitting. You can draw in the fatty milk honey into your mouth, because this actually stimulates the release of new live salivary output, and there might be more fresh enzyme in there at higher quantities, higher concentrations, like that. So it's going to be honey and milk and honey under your tongue. This is what will bring about the future world. If you can grow your teeth in your face using this combination, you feel what the upside is for everything imaginable around you. God promised you that it would be a land flowing with milk and honey. You made the mistake of thinking it was just metaphorical. What do you think is going to be happening everywhere across the whole land on this earth? And especially centered in Jerusalem.
The hidden light that's hidden behind this, which is a light that's so great that's above the norm. It's a chaotic light in a positive sense. It's so great and sublime that it defies logic, that it defies any value system that existed before. Revelation of Moshiach coming into the world, and the world is not yet ready for it. So when it enters the world, it just creates chaos.
Because it's Dajjal at the back of this, the mastermind.
So they will go and see, Hind, the calamity has come. The Dajjal has come.
So what is he? Is he a human being? Yes, he is. He is actually a human being. He is male. He will have a large body. He is bow-legged.
He walks a little different.
Big forehead. All from authentic narration. But I want to say all the hadith. How fast does he travel? How, does he go so quickly, so slow? He goes as fast as a cloud driven by wind. He's so fast all across earth.
The second eye is damaged.
There's also aspects of Tichas Mason that will happen in Yemos Mashiach. It actually says Moshe and Aaron are going to come back to teach Mashiach how to build the Beis HaMikdash.
He He will tell the earth, spit out your treasures. The hadith says, like bees, gold and silver and diamonds will come out of the ground and follow him.
Not all, but much of the kesef is of, all the silver and the gold that comes, that is visible in the world, will all come towards the Beit HaMikdash. It will have tremendous amount of trappings, and it will make every other building and edifice, especially in our days, which is very difficult to do, it'll make it look small compared to the beauty of what the Beit HaMikdash will look like.
What do we have to do? We have to be able to take what, as Rebbe's terminology was, we have to take these great lights, which are uncontained, and to channel them.
That brings God into creation by the axe, which is the Jews, Sheikh ben David, Sheikh ben Yosef. God is the fourth wheel, but that means he himself is responsible for bringing himself into creation.
The Lubavitcher Rebbe noted that the custom of eating dairy and sweet foods on certain holidays, like milk and honey in particular, is a foretaste of the messianic delight in Torah, when the promise of a land flowing with milk and honey will be experienced in more than just a spiritual sense. The Talmud states explicitly, in a manner that essentially joins secrets and mysteries with milk and honey. And the hint is given again. Your lips, O bride, drip honey. Honey and milk are under your tongue. That's the future world and the key to it. It is told to us in essence that while the Ramban accepted the miraculous elements of prophecy regarding how the future world would come about, that this ultimately meant that God would be the one who would be blessing these efforts with success and with supernatural enhancement at the appointed time. This is the time when Moshiach is born. It is as if the temple destined is almost prefabricated in a kind of sense, as if descending from heaven almost instantaneously to basically just pop up and manifest in place. Master of the world, when will you build it with your hands? Moses asked. It is known that God builds the third temple. It is known that King Messiah is destined to build the temple. The Zohar states explicitly, the third holy temple must be in a complete state of purity. The first two temples, along with everything else basically that's built up or formed by human hands, as is said, in this world today, everything that constitutes the edifice and the substance of the building is taken from pre-existing material that already exists here on earth. If you're going to get the stones that are already preformed, created stones that have existed with the world, well, we know that everything found on this earth, scooped up and taken to form these buildings, has just got the same energy and energetic problems and encodances that come along with the whole thing, wherever it is, differing a little bit here to there, but it's the same overall energy. The interesting thing is that when you begin to utilize this method, this process to grow the things, especially when done within some essentially sort of firewalled or secured area, or within certain secured conditions like this, then the portion which can be cut off, isolated, and have from there grown again a little more, and so on and so on, this is matter that has never existed during this world prior to the current moment in which it is being formed. So it didn't soak up the energies from the pre-existing field of matter embedded around everywhere around it. You understand? This is the main reason, among the few main reasons why this is finally being revealed to the world now. The second temple was built by people and thus could not endure. But the third one cannot be built by people in that same sense, taking from the world to build the world in that way. For even if we found righteous builders, it's the materials that come from a world which is still marred by negative energy. That's what the building of the third Beit HaMikdash is all about. It must come down, in a sense, complete from heaven. Okay, resuming recording now. So there's a couple of more interesting things that are worthy to discuss here. One of them is the effect of metals within all of this. You see, so it's interesting how human development came along. We started using fire, various ways of doing so. Nowadays we have gas coming into the homes. We set the gas aflame, we cook with it. That's a standard thing. Nowadays electric is popular a little bit more and all that. And we also use pots and pans made out of metal typically. We have ceramic as an alternative. Here's the interesting thing. Whenever you use anything in this whole process, you're trying to bring these ion complexes and electrons and create all this here, okay? Essentially, anytime you use anything that's made out of metal, like a metal pot or pan like this, okay, everything that you might have had or could have had going on in there, let's say the temperature's low enough that you're not denaturing the enzymes, but you have what would have otherwise been the formed ion-rich, energy-dense, energy-rich solution, okay? But instead of being all this really and maintaining it, unlike the glass and especially the, like wax paper lined or plastic encasings, that metal is going to basically steal it away immediately, just about almost instantly on contact. It's going to be gone. So it's not going to be all that, but instead it's going to just go out into here because it's much more conducive, basically. But that's right. That's what has been found so far. Okay, same thing goes for forks. Anytime you're even using utensils, knives and forks and spoons that are made out of metal, once you're doing that, you're taking away that vibrancy from everything that makes that touches. Okay, so one of the first things you want to do is if you want to start preserving the potency and feeding it into your body to start charging up your own battery of self, so to speak. And there's a reason we want to do this. You want to avoid all these things. You're going to replace your metal pots and pans, and you're going to opt for the ceramic stuff, not just the ceramic lined stuff, which I don't highly recommend, but the ones that are the most genuinely ceramic pots and pans. You're going to love your wooden spoons from now on, and that's how you go for it. And anytime you're working with this stuff, you're going to be looking to do glass and ceramic and plastics and like this. Okay, now I mentioned again that when it's glass, it's like slightly semi-permeable. You people might have a hard time understanding, what do you mean the glass is permeable such that the ions can be felt coming to the outside? That's what I'm telling you. Because the ions and ion complexes are small enough. Very few things that we hold typically in glass are small enough to come through the glass, but that's not necessarily the case with everything. You must understand, check this out.
Here I have a beaker with an unglazed ceramic bottom of ultrafine porosity.
Ordinarily, this container with tiny pores can hold liquid helium. But the moment the helium turns superfluid, it leaks through.
You're seeing that on the bottom.
We call this kind of flow a superflow.
It's just leaking through the glass.
Superfluid helium can do things we might have believed impossible.
Okay, the reason for this is that helium, when brought into a liquid, becomes thin enough that it's one of the only things in existence that can permeate through the otherwise solid, so to speak, silica lattice structure of that glass. Okay, but that's the same thing we observe and I feel with the electrons or ions, whatever you want to call it. Okay, so that's why you want to use fatty plastics and things like this is even a higher level of insulation, but the glass is decent, so it'll hold it for maybe a couple days depending on how concentrated your stuff is. So pretty wild stuff. Okay, and here's the final concept for you. Without giving away too much detail, I'm going to hold a little bit back for now, but just consider that in nature, and even using certain supplements and things like this, and neurotransmitters, I'll say that much for now, one can expand and sharpen and increase the level of acuity of your perception. It's most obvious and notable with your vision. There's certain things you can, for example, take into your mouth, hold onto your tongue, and just making contact with it by the neuroreceptors will induce a chain where the light comes into your eyes. You can just see more, your peripheral vision expands, and all like this, right? Well, that has to do with taking in, perhaps some of the neurotransmitters like this. Doesn't necessarily have a beneficial effect on the underlying receptor density of your nervous system tree, basically, right? But here's where it gets interesting. When we now begin to work at the level of these ions and ion complexes, what is it about this stuff that the body fundamentally desires? You were led to eat food with your innate enzymatic action. Apparently nearly or virtually all life has this capacity to enzymatically break down the stuff because it's that important, but you're living off of that energy as shown here. It's for your brain and your nervous system to continue processing, where in a sort of way it's the seat of your consciousness, loosely speaking, right? It's where you operate from in some sense. So it looks like really the narrative of all of life is how we must be farming and harvesting internally through the biological and physiological mechanisms, living off of this stuff. You just didn't realize it yet, where we can grow ourselves just like this rock. So but it doesn't only grow us physically, it brings a higher degree of consciousness into our awareness. That's right. There's different ways we measure consciousness, strength of consciousness, organization of thought, and all these kinds of things. People sort of conflate or associate that with intelligence or cognitive potential in that way, and that's roughly right. Okay, you see, you can increase the level of life that you have inside of you. One of the best ways to do this, of course, you want to avoid the metals like this and preserve it in your food, eat the fresh fruits and all that. But besides this, you want to start using these techniques to purposely put in the enzymes. Maybe whether you cook them at the end away or not is up to you. Slight warning, if you buy supplements, you see the proteases that break down the proteins, those are neutral pH. Your body doesn't produce really neutral pH proteases, otherwise you might, if you tear your intestine, then you absorb it everywhere, you disintegrate yourself. And I'm not going to tell some of the freak stuff that's been going on with me. That's maybe another story. You always pay a little bit of a price when you're at the frontier, okay? And you have also crazy things going on health-wise. Okay, but we'll just leave it as a little bit of a hint for now that if one wants to experiment with or bring up the potential of one's ability to draw in more of a acuity of perception across your senses, and increase your cognitive ability slightly, start making it a practice to I'd say, not only eat more leafy greens, because the fresh leaves and the greens have something that isn't stable otherwise in a product that we would store on the shelf. You could get a partial aspect of this just ripping open the salads and the whole leaves with your teeth. You will get the free ions, and that has an effect too. Okay, that's as good as you could get naturally. But you start doing this stuff here, You make it a practice to consume a lot of this, or especially hold it in your mouth. You saw those that superfluid helium leak through? It's the same way that this stuff leaks through your cells, your bones, and the other secret is you don't need an insulin response in order to open up the membranes of your cells sufficiently. It helps, you get a little more, but you're not completely locked out from absorbing and running energy if you don't have that, okay? The free ions and ion complexes themselves ripple through your body the way DMSO would rip through your body, okay? For those who know about that. When you hold it in your mouth, it's going to come right through the bone. You're going to grow over time slowly aspects of your face, your bones, around your head. But your brain, which is only 2% of your body weight or something like this, a couple pounds, takes up 40, 60% or more, something like this, of the total energy caloric burn. Okay, all your energies, your nervous system and brain power. It's running on this stuff. If you hold it at your face, in your mouth, for extended periods of time, it's going to absorb into your brain and you're going to gain super capacity higher than your ordinary self. So there's your initial heading in the right direction, but it gets even deeper than that, maybe for other topics. So no one's ever told you any of these things before. This is not known stuff, so you have it here for the first time. Enjoy. Your job, people, is that you're going to take these initial insights. They came down through me. They would not be available right now for everybody had it not been through me. But it will be because of this that it's now left at your feet, people. And you're going to be the ones who take it up and who develop it at the physical plane and the physical level here to the next level. You're going to figure out how to get the electromagnetism replicated through industrious methods so that it doesn't have to be a human being holding it and clamping on the glass and holding it like this. And you're going to be the ones figuring what magnets aligned at what angles induce the current to run in a certain way. For you see, this is how nature works. You will figure out the next steps, because once we get it to be about an order or a level higher than the rate at which I have been able to, at my very best, grow this stuff out a couple years ago, that's going to be good enough to run the next future world. Quite literally, this prophecy is taken. In the future, the Holy One, blessed be He, will bring precious stones and pearls that are 30 by 30 cubits, hollow them out, and set them in the gates of Jerusalem. I will make your gates of precious stones. Literally, God will set up precious stones and pearls as the gates of Jerusalem. For in this time to come, gold and silver will be like dust before the King Messiah. For when it settles, at that time there will be neither famine nor war. All good things will be bestowed in abundance, and all delicacies will be as plentiful as dust. A very concrete and literal fulfillment of biblical prophecy. The gates of Jerusalem will be built with sapphire and emerald, and all your walls with precious stones. And obviously, as we discussed a little while ago, prior, the third temple itself. Now, returning to this quickly as a side note, also for those of you wanting to avoid metal, you may switch out to some kind of ceramic or whatever. But what else you're going to want to avoid as well, or at least consider or watch out for, is the fire. There seems to be something about the fire reaction that interferes with the neat, calm preservation of all these ions. So imagine man, after making fire and metals, he began to change rapidly, didn't he? You're going to take away your fires. We have different alternative ways of heating things, obviously on the heated panels and things like this. You're not interfering. And so with the proper insulation, proper covering, sealing, even using wax paper underlined or whatever, you're really going to preserve a chamber where you, for the first time, are properly keeping it. And when you give pre-time for the enzymes to work, you keep it low temp, or you use high temperatures, cook it out, but then you still accelerate the rate at which these ions perhaps can work on the substrate, if you include the substrate. I've had experiences where you start introducing a high amount of heat, literally the size of your pan magically grows in your hands, and you have a wider pan. You're holding it, going, this was not this wide, and I know that. It's amazing. So, The city was pure gold, like clear glass, and the city's wall was made of jasper. The foundations of the city wall were adorned with every kind of precious stone. I bet you, as a side note, that has something to do with how the presence of gems in the high volume and the large amount will contribute to the inducing of the proper energetic currents all around within the broader space, such that everybody walking around and residing within that space actually is operating at a higher vibrational level. That could be one way to consider it. Bet you there's some truth to that. What else? The streets of gold and pearly gates. We know. Continuing. One well-known hadith recorded describes the architecture of paradise in terms of, that's right again, a brick of the wall being of gold, the next brick is of silver. The mortar is fragrant musk, its pebbles are pearls and rubies, the soil is saffron. That's called heaven on earth, literally built out of gold and silver. I wouldn't be surprised that it's saffron either. That has an interesting connection to some other things. But for now, all the traditions that we hold prophetically indicate simply the reality of the inevitable. Gold, silver, and gems are linked and come with the Messianic age and the third temple, and with what is regarded as the future world and the future or New Jerusalem. There's something that's known as Morgellons disease, which is some condition where essentially something solid, a supersaturate of some kind, fibers, right, get embedded into your skin, and then something is observed which goes against the traditional or classic science, but is consistent with what I've been telling you here. The fibers will start growing. It's as if they become seeded, they become bonded to the matter or material of the flesh of the person. At that point, again, as a result of that same orientation that we showed on the screen earlier, which is the basis where the electromagnetic field comes from, then you have the substrate or the supersaturate itself, and then on the other side you have that which contributes the free ions or ion complexes. So what do we have here? Joni Mitchell, the celebrity, saying that she's had this, and up until recently, doctors didn't know what to make of it, but however, in the recent years, they've admitted that this does seem to be a legitimate observation. Let's see what she says. She describes seeing fibers in a variety of colors, and they protrude out of her skin like mushrooms. And when do they onset or protrude or grow? After a rainstorm. During the rainstorm, they suddenly will protrude more afterwards, because the rainstorm provides that much of the... So you're all seeing the same patterning now. A pattern matching machine like an AI would probably see the validity of this and get deeper insight than many of the naive people will, but we've shown and hinted at the truth sufficiently here. People, this is what you've been looking at the whole time. This is how the growth of matter in this universe works. Mystery solved. Let's start growing the things. Now here's where things get even more interesting. It's supposed or figured essentially by some that there are a number of messianic sparks or sparks of sparks around in this world. Here is another individual who, at around the time that I made the decision to release this information that's being released now, that I've been sitting on for 2 years, this guy here on his own channel, where he has never gone into this particular subject matter, all of a sudden he apparently channels in his own way and figures to just make a video about this, touching almost squarely upon the essential kind or same matter that I'm touching upon here.
State of metal. Any substance that is inherently inclined toward perfection can reach it through intense labor and refinement. However, know that this transformation is only possible with the presence of actual gold, which serves as the agent that draws other metals.
Right, so if as far as this guy's gotten, which is pretty decent, I think, we would understand, yes, indeed it is true. The ions and ion complexes are the things that are drawn to the supersaturate to extend and grow onto the supersaturate with basically with the seed stuff first being there.
This is why gold is first dissolved in pure strong waters, achoragia. Through a meticulous process of refining and distilling, known to alchemists, the gold is then reintroduced into the base metals, gradually converting them into gold through sustained heat.
And I do agree, heat does accelerate the process wherever I've used or experimented with this myself. But continuing here, indeed, if we were able to do this and then to perhaps dehydrate in essence, or find the balance and concentration so that there remains a supersaturate of the gold or whatever corresponding thing. You know, heck, I've seen processes where, you know, some advanced people even will convert gold. Reportedly, it's possible, right, regarding the ormus or monatomic elements, that one can actually convert the gold to the monatomic form, which is easy enough. That's how it's sold. The stuff exists. And then converting it back into gold from that form. It could be possible. I don't know for sure. But regarding this, here's the part that's missing. If we were able to somehow merge and mix this stuff, no, I don't know, something's holding me back here. We would have to see, or I offer it up to the world essentially to put the final physical pieces together after the spiritual inspiration is here put. But the key involves the milk and honey, very likely, the ions and ion complexes that come from enzymatically harvesting these ions and ion complexes, and then directing them through electromagnetic sort of induction, really, to the underlying supersaturate or substrate to then build upon it at the higher rates. And I bet that if we could dissolve the gold such that unlike sitting in distilled water, aqua regia could have a lot more of the actual gold in the solution, that could increase the rates at which this stuff is produced. Maybe.
The gold is then reintroduced into the base metals, gradually converting them into gold through sustained heat. This mirrors the natural process by which sunlight refines the Earth's elements over time, producing gold deposits. Just as a fermenting agent can leaven dough and a seed can propagate its kind, so too gold can transform other metals, but only through gold itself. Just the most refined of materials, just as in alchemy, where only gold can produce gold, so too only the divine light of Atzilus can elevate the fallen worlds back to their source. This is why Kabbalah is called the gold of wisdom, for it alone possesses the power to redeem creation and restore divine unity. The ultimate redemption is not achieved through silver, but through gold.
Now, let's say that you start out with a solution, you're just beginning to, I don't want to say ionize, but you get the idea, enzymatically begin the process in which we begin to yield this whole thing. So, what I've noticed in my own personal experimentation, the way I perceive it at least, I'm slightly less sure than full certainty with this than virtually all the other things I've presented here, but this is basically what seems to be going on. So the fluid is sort of neutral in essence, right? It starts off as completely neutral, and then eventually, the way it seems to go is that the way that the ionic shine induces and where it densifies the most is going to be in the lower components first. Okay? And then here is a little bit dense, and here is not as dense. You know, like how you have salt water, sugar water, it's a little more sweet on the bottom than on the top layer. It's sort of like this. And then it keeps intensifying here more, which sort of shifts the gradient of the whole thing upwards. And then it keeps being stronger here. But eventually what's going to happen is that you have a crossing over, a shifting, where then at the residual crossover levels, as you're coming down into the down phase, is that the remnants of what was the, so to speak, quote-unquote, good or surplus part shifts over. But then you get the contractive level, that opposite stuff. This is the portion that if you sip this, you shrink. You literally go the opposite way. It removes structure from the lattice. It's the reverse effect. And then that part eventually grows, kicks out the prior stuff. Maybe it seeps out or otherwise becomes destroyed. And eventually the whole thing becomes that, and it becomes like a shrunken head. Or something. And then maybe weeks later, if it ever reneutralizes, or however you do it, is however it's done. It's interesting to observe that gradient process setting in. That seems to be what happens, right? Let's take a look at that fuller article that we cited, which is from about 10 years ago almost. Numerous lines of evidence challenge the traditional interpretations of how crystals nucleate and grow in both synthetic and natural environments, etc., etc. Goes on to state, experimental observations clearly demonstrate crystallization by particle attachment. Many fundamental aspects, the fundamental ones even, yes, see, remain unknown. Not just back then, but even still today. Not substantial amounts of progress have been made since this was originally published. What else can we find here? Goes on to note, despite the successes of classical nucleation and growth models, the models, right? Our limited understanding, goes on to state there are a number of phenomena associated with crystal formation that cannot satisfactorily be explained or predicted, either quantitatively or qualitatively. That's a profound statement. Goes on to state here, interestingly, after making notes about tooth enamel, something classically regarded as not being able to be grown, that's false. Goes on to state these discoveries show that in many systems, crystallization can occur by attachment of a wide range of species, more complex than just the simple ions, but can be that and a lot more. So this really gets profoundly wild, and it's a confession that essentially we know little to nothing, which naturally leaves room for exactly the kind of profound observations with new insight into leveraging and creating phenomena that have not yet been seen or explained. That's why you're seeing this first ever here in this video. To the furthermore, it states, moreover, beyond what's shown here, crystals grown through classical mechanisms within physical templates or with the addition of organic polymers can exhibit similar morphologies to those seen in natural biominerals and in synthetic crystals attributed to crystallization by particle attachment. This is the new phenomenal means we're seeing. So, it goes on to state and figure that interpreting and particulate-like morphologies in terms of pathways, how did this grow? How did this onset? Well, this requires other substantiating evidence, such as, look at this crazy crystal grow this way beyond what would be otherwise possible if we were naively figuring only the classical means, right? It goes on to state, conversely, even when the formation pathways are dominated by particle addition, I guess of the simple kind in the early stages, coarsening or recrystallization can subsequently obliterate characteristic signatures, so they don't even know what's what. Thus, the absence of such features is not conclusive evidence of monomer by monomer growth, the classic simple way, basically. As a result, then, holistic suites of characterization techniques, such a holistic suite is and would be essential to building a strong case for CPA being an occurrence in any given system that you may or may not be having or beholding. Again, tricky stuff. Though it goes on to state eventually there that all this implies that essentially CPA is a prevalent growth system. Prevalent, yes, at the early stages of crystallization even. You've gone on to figure that all this has to do with figuring the interplay of free energy landscapes, reaction dynamics, and like that. Well, of course. Goes on to state as supersaturation increases within a system, the free energy barrier to phase change diminishes and particles are generated in greater numbers. They then grow or shrink by exchanging monomer. What's interesting is that this goes on to note the existence of what are essentially meta-stable systems or solutions, basically. So there's precursor stages, there's nucleation that takes place, and all that, and essentially, this would be going out slightly on a limb though, it's possible perhaps that the seeding or the initiation of these events may be already in motion and carrying forward with the momentum before there's actually even a physical crystallized supersaturate or nucleation where even in the preceding phase, wherever there's sufficiently high density and concentration, there's already some kind of orientation beyond pure chaos that's happening that facilitates the kind of sort of magnetism that takes place even before the phase-locked aspect manifests when you have full solidity, which is the case when you have the molecules aligned in lock as solids matter. One can comb through all the publications on this subject to figure whether that's possible or likely. This may or may not be alluded to somewhere in here, but you get the idea. This is the ways that life works. I'm actually kind of surprised that this hasn't been really discovered and just shown forwards openly till now. But they go on to state here that it is a complete physical picture of crystallization that encompasses the diversity of potential pathways that must now be developed. Wasn't developed yet. If the many scientific fields in which crystallization is a common phenomenon are to reach their full potential. Let's manifest that potential. What's amazing is that that particular summer when I was experimenting most intensely on myself using this pre-formed, intentionally insulated, hyper-driven up way of collecting the ion complexes and potentiating their density and then consuming this in the milk and the honey and all this, milk and honey. My bones, over the course of about a few to several weeks that summer, grew so long, outpacing as in my mid-30s, suddenly growing so long that summer it got so bad that near late summer I couldn't lengthen, I couldn't expand my joints, my knees, my hips and elbows and shoulders to stretch out my arms straight because the bones got so long that the muscles didn't keep up, such that I couldn't straighten my arms and legs anymore, and I was walking around with bent knees and elbows and shoulders for weeks. Interestingly, eventually after stopping, it sort of slowly over time re-regulated, and yeah, true story. This then is how physics and physiology really works, and the biochemistry and all that. One wouldn't think it would be possible until you hack and gain the new ways. In subsequent research, I figured out how to test various different compounds from various different sources. You take certain juices sourced from certain places, mix it with certain other things, and you will have new and distinct facets occurring that you won't get otherwise. For example, you might grow the bones one way, but they won't grow in another axis. Then another source of solution induces your bones to grow outward, circular, thickening, but you won't grow them longer. They'll all just get thicker. Here's something interesting. One particular thing, and I tried this with somebody else, there's one that seems to make more dense the inside of your bones, where all the inner substances, where the marrow and all this are on the insides. So you could hear it when you clack your knuckles. So I experienced this. I heard my bones becoming more dense. When you knock on anything, the sound pitch is different. I grabbed somebody else. I said, hey, you got to recreate this with me. Knock your knuckles together. Knock your bones against each other and against solid things. And she did it. Then we gave her the solution. After about an hour, hour and a half, she's knocking her bones. She's going, oh my God, they sound different and denser. And then she starts punching other things in the walls. And she's like, my bones are like, they feel 10 times harder. I could break the wall. What the hell? I said, exactly. You just witnessed the truth of it again. We give her a different solution. She had a small gap in between one of her teeth. Her tooth, the way it came down. I said, feel if there's any change in gap. You have the proprioceptive ability with your tongue and your nervous system. You can pick it up. Before long, she said, oh my God, the gap is sealed. How the hell? Instantaneously. I say, there you go. We can create the future. Regarding something that has been colloquially known as ormus, which is the monatomic metals that have been known about. One particular doctor, it's actually the same guy involving the gold growth from silica and leverage by microwaving, which is interesting in all this. Long story short, this guy had this supersaturate dry crystalline material coating the like lab glass or whatever, and it would spontaneously grow. But where the error was made was that the man figured as a result there must be this stuff in the air, such sufficient amounts of it that it's somehow attaching. When you presume a supposed necessity that you must have the pre-existing same substance exactly within the surrounding ether, gas, or solution in order for it to add on to whatever it is that's being grown, right? That's false. So therefore, the original assumption here that Ormus is a gas because there's observed this crystal growth isn't right. Simply, it's because whenever that thunderstorm passes or whatever other localized source of electrons you can bring into the equation, or ions and ion complexes, right? And enzymatically breaking down and siphoning off and keeping from dispersing that concentration of stuff. That's the substrate. That's all it is. So now we understand everything in context now. Aha, the eureka moment. For those who are interested to further consider anything that might even potentially work, again, this is also out on a limb a little bit. I've no direct personal experience with this myself, except that you can consider how over the decades it's been reported that, at least anecdotally, sometimes when some people build these pyramid structures and align them precisely with the magnetic north and align other things, they'll be able to, apparently not always, sometimes it's debunked, and yet other times there seem to be results. There's a sharpening of metallic items that's placed at the correct angle and all like this. Why is that happening? Again, this has to do with the electromagnetic, perhaps amplification, leveraging some kind of quality that's present within the ether and how the different aspects and dynamics work. So what does this mean for us? Maybe or maybe not that this has any involvement in the processes that we're uncovering now, but can you imagine re-invoking or involving these concepts and figuring whether they can tangibly and significantly amplify what it is that we're doing? Perhaps all the right pieces coming together. Remember, we saw everything that had to come together for these results. If one of those things was missing, even just one, maybe we would have not seen the kind of results that we ended up seeing. Finally, who am I? And what has my story been over the last year, couple of years, few years?
I just came to my senses, yo. I stay in another dimension. Fear is non-existent. Suit up and swing through the city. Hey, annihilate. I'm wide awake. Be very afraid. I'm in my own world. Give me space. I'm in my own universe. Give me space. Yeah. Weezy Carter. I'm about to go Peter Parker. Spider-Man. If he ain't me, he's just a creepy crawler.
They can't pinpoint exactly what you are, but they're looking at you as though you are this Messiah.
More people are looking at you in a more profound way than even any of the old version of stars have been looked at. New wave of stars in this world, and you probably have already seen it start to begin.
As long as I can watch Spider-Man, I'm the luckiest boy in the world.
Coming true, Spider-Man.
Woo! Woo!
"'Tis said that whoever pulls the sword is chosen to rule the kingdom. Many heroes have tried, but none hath
Yeah, I'll throw my hat in the ring.
Anyone can do it.
Or just it, yeah. I don't want to be in this, this world's cruel.
Into an essence that would light back out and shine in a way that no one has ever shown before in this world. That's the new wave of stars, and you're one of the first.
How does the neshama do this? Because it shines a certain light. That's all that goes in the mind. And suddenly the person goes, I understand it.
You're too fast.
Do you believe that my being stronger or faster has anything to do with my muscles in this place? You think that's air you're breathing now? You're faster than this. Don't think you are. Know you are. Come on, stop trying to hit me and hit me! I know what you're trying to do. I'm trying to free your mind, Neo.
He will wake up, and the spirit and power of prophecy will be added onto him. V'yit'ar mishnatein, he'll wake up from his sleep. Ve'az, yizkeh Mashiach le'ota neshama, ve'titgale bo, ve'az yakir be'atzmo shu Mashiach. Mashiach will wake up from a certain shluf. Mashiach will recognize within himself that he is Mashiach. This will only happen after this extra level of soul is planted within him. See, he says over here, false messiahs have been people that know they may have had potential to be Mashiach, but they didn't go through this waking up from a shluf and a new dimension of soul being placed within them. That's how Reb Chaim Vital says. But from that moment on, he wakes up over there, and then this next level of neshama goes into him.
There's no hesitance, there's no
he's operating in a completely different dimension.
It's Chamor. Moshiach is going to be coming, ani, meaning that he doesn't care about all this gashmi of this world, materialistic, and he's going to go on the Chamor, on the Chumriyot, on the materialism. He's going to overcome his desires to do stupid things and sins. That's Moshiach.
When Mashiach will come, it is described as tunnels, as they're coming through tunnels and the ground is opening up and they're coming out. This is all a description which is highlighting the fact that in the Zohar, at the end of Pashas Balak, the Zohar describes there the events that will unfold before Mashiach comes. In the end of Pashas Balak, the Zohar quotes the verse, Arenu v'layata, Shirenu v'laykarev, the prophecy of Bilam, that he sees the coming of Mashiach in the distant future. And the Zohar elaborates on different events that will unfold, which will lead up to the coming of Mashiach. And most importantly, in our preparation for the coming of Mashiach, so we'll take a look if there's any connection between the concept of tunnels and the coming of Mashiach.
Earlier today, I asked you a question. I said, how would you feel if I called you a monster?
If you called me a monster, my first reaction to that is a negative one. I generally associate monsters with demonic forces that we all have inside of us. But I want to know where you're going with this.
I think we're all monsters. I think some of us hide the fact that we're monsters more than others. Other people are willing to show what they're capable of.
In other words, the information of that messianic light is so great that it will ultimately change the entire world. Now, beauty is a very important concept. What beauty is when many, many different pieces fit together in a harmonious blend. So if you look at it individually, then each one seems to be a separate piece. But if you see them all together, there's some type of, what comes out of that is a tremendous integration that expresses a beauty far beyond the pieces. Are we looking at something which is fragmented? Or are we rather looking at something which is all together, it's all integrated, you see?
He is here. I don't believe he's in Jerusalem. I do believe, however, he's in New York. He's in the United States. And that may sound odd, but the reason for that is that the Mashiach, Messiah, is born and raised in a country that he will ultimately change. I don't know if I want to use the word overthrow, because I don't know if that's the proper word, but clearly modify, radically alter and change. We find that to be very true.
May I merit to sit in the shadow of his donkey's dung. So what, only Reshaim is scared of the Mashiach? Let's see.
Into a structure where you can see each piece, not only understand each piece, but you can understand the relationship between each piece. You see, that's a very important idea, because essentially the difference between the Sheikh Ben Yosef's wisdom, you see, which is really the Messianic light, And the wisdom that we have today is that the wisdom we have today is all piecemeal. It's all fragmented. It's called pirud. Everything is separate, you see. But the Moshiach ben Yosef, what he does is he weaves everything together into a beautiful tapestry or fabric, where when you look at one piece, you're looking at the totality, the scope of the Chokhmah. The Torah in many ways is fragmented, you see. We don't see the underlying theme or what connects the entire Torah together. We don't see that. That is concealed from us. So what the Moshiach ben Yosef does is that he unifies everything. He integrates everything. But he integrates not only the physical world, but he integrates the spiritual world, and then he integrates the physical with the spiritual, and the spiritual with the physical. You see, where everything is seen as a tremendous jigsaw puzzle looking at the big picture. And apparently that chokhmah is the tremendous chokhmah or wisdom of reality. And what does everybody seek when you think about it? They want to know what is real. What is reality all about? You see, everybody wonders growing up, what is reality really? And value is, in this reality, what is important. That's the concept of value. But basic, first, is the concept of reality. What is it? So the reality of the wisdom of the Moshiach ben Yosef, which is the Messianic light, is the real reality. You see, it goes from one end to the other end, where you see everything connected. And once you have that, then you could decide on value. Well, within that understanding of reality, right, what is important and what is not important? That's the concept of value. But you really can only have value when you have reality. And that's called the Kani Re'im. It's really what it is. That's the horns of a Re'im. Because somehow he is able to weave the reality of this world with the reality of the Torah and with the reality of all the spiritual worlds.
I am a true prophet, Al-Sadiq Al-Amin. I am the truthful one. Moshiach ben Yosef can conquer the Yetzer Hara, but they can't. Ruach HaKadosh. Come, Holy Spirit, come, fill my cup, Berkas Hamazon, Berkas Hamazon. 3 cups are filled, and now for the 4th cup, for Yesod, for the foundation, for Yesod. Times I have died every day waiting for you. Darling, don't be afraid, I have loved you for 1,000 years. I have loved you for 1,000 more. Instead, you shall spill your blood for me. You shall spill your blood for me, and I shall be your Zonia, your witch wife. Zonia means wife in Polish. Till the end of your life, I shall be your Zonia then. That is my wish. My wish is for you to say it 3 times in my ear. Once more, Isaiah says, the root of Jesse will appear. Yeah, once more, Isaiah says, the root of Jesse will appear. One who will arise to rule over the Gentiles. In him, the Gentiles will put their hope. Indeed, because Moshiach ben Yosef is here, and Moshiach ben Yosef is the foreigner. They already exposed him. They already exposed him for the entire world to see. I'm using it not for sin, but to slay them. I'm using it to slay them because they tried to slay me. They already did it. They already exposed me. They were sinning, not me. Al-Sadiq Al-Amin from Muhammad al-Mahdi. Turn the Yetzer Hara into a Pegasus or a unicorn, the conquering of the Yetzer Hara, which Moshiach ben Yosef can do, bringing about a new messianic age, where it's no longer going to be about shame anymore. There's been enough shame and enough war and pillaging it.
Tell Jesus that the bitch is back. I was into it on the uptown, and nigga, you know what's up. You keep running through my head.
For they were scared of Moshiach ben Yosef. They were scared that he was going to slay thee. And indeed he will, for they were using it for evil, but now he shall use it for good, for he is Moshiach ben Yosef, and he's basically going to flip the switch.
Maimonides presents laws, practical law. Practical law means, how do we identify who Moshiach is? How do we know where we are? Unless you have a guidebook.
Maimonides Medical Center is at the doorstep of...
We have a very special Kabbalah that on the 9th month, on the 9th day, on the 9th hour, the gates of the heavens are open.
999. So instead of dying, he will go through 999 tests and travails and tribulations. He's got 999 problems, but dead man. If you know that song. Rabbi Levi Yitzchak of Berdichev, who was one of the great early Hasidic masters, and it's based on a verse in Tehillim in Psalm 87, where it says, Hashem ispor bichtov amim, that God counts in the register, in the counting system of the nations of the world. So if the nations of the world follow a particular counting system, okay, so then God also follows that counting system.
Based on a talk that the Rebbe said in 1988.
Instead of arguing that the Rebbe is Moshiach, I would argue he was the prophet.
Menachem Mendel Schneerson, the leader of the Chabad Lubavitch movement, known simply as the Rebbe. The Rebbe reportedly believed Netanyahu had a mission from God to prepare Israel for the coming of the Messiah. Over the next decade, the two men developed a close relationship.
What makes him like Elijah more than any other prophet?
Everybody knows that the Rebbe said already from when he was a little boy, that from when he was even before he went to Cheder, he was already dreaming and he began to visualize the images of the redemption.
A couple of years after this meeting, the Rebbe reportedly told a young Netanyahu that he would one day become Prime Minister of Israel and would be the nation's last leader before handing the scepter to the Messiah.
Because he's like Elijah.
Right. Elijah-like.
An Elijah-like teacher, prophet.
In the final chapter of Mishnah Torah, the Rambam tells us that at the very beginning of Yemais HaMashiach, the Messianic days, we will see a war unfold known as Gog uMagog. And then the Rambam says that before this war, there will be a Navi, a prophet who will arise. And the purpose of this prophet's arising or coming,
an event that triggers Mashiach, is why Elijah, to announce the coming of Mashiach.
That will tell us that Mashiach is very close.
In 1988, the Rebbe said that now is the time. That we have to give life to the king. Yehi HaMelech, long live the king. Changing the process of redemption has started because Moshiach is in New York, the Rebbe says. And
Studying, I think, a very interesting topic. I've been asked for many times to talk about current events. And what's the current event? Mashiach. Just a reminder, what we talked last week is about the potential people, personas, right? That could be the Mashiach ben Yosef. Mashiach ben Yosef, I remind you, is a state. Does he know that he's a Mashiach? That some people know and he doesn't know? That he knows and other people know? How he will be announced? Who's going to tell him? What is he going to do?
Something that was not revealed, as it were, from Hashem's heart to his mouth. So that's something that we know about. Those who know don't speak, and those who speak don't know, as they say.
want to talk about a subject that is maybe a little dangerous. Moshiach ben Yosef. Something, an idea that probably everyone's heard of, at least in passing. Here and there you hear about this idea of Moshiach ben Yosef. It's something that I think most people have heard, but like nobody really knows anything about. And like, what is this Moshiach ben Yosef? Where did this idea come from? Two messiahs, Moshiach ben Yosef, Moshiach ben David. Who is Moshiach ben Yosef? Why is this necessary? And you find that people don't really talk about Moshiach ben Yosef much. There seems to be this fear of talking about Moshiach ben Yosef. And so it's something that people know very little about. We know the basics. Moshiach ben Yosef is this warrior messiah. He's sometimes called the warrior messiah. He's supposed to come and fight in the battle, the final apocalyptic war of
For those of you who aren't yet necessarily aware, we're recording this around late summer 2025, for about 1 year now, since around summertime of last year, 2024, underground rumors of a substantially strong nature have gone around both this country here in America and internationally around the world regarding who is Moshiach ben Yosef. These rumors have persisted for a while. For a while, people have been waiting for this person to stand up and acknowledge the circumstances, or to proclaim or declare that one is in fact such a figure. But interestingly, several months and more went by, and no outward, broad, publicly directed, open proclamation of any such kind happened. Perhaps people didn't know what quite to think. Now things have sort of, very basically speaking, come to a sort of lull. Meanwhile, nothing is clear, and nothing has been clear to the rest of you till now. This is my first broadly, publicly directed message in this entire time since. Why did I stay largely publicly silent for such a prolonged period of time? Basically speaking, it was to test you. And I've seen enough of what I've needed to see in order to understand how to properly proceed. And now, here we are. Months back on my own YouTube channel, on one of the videos I posted there, I featured a little bit of an Easter egg or hidden reference to this, which comes in the form of a Nostradamus prophecy, where he was, among other things, prophesizing about the coming Antichrists. 3 figures he saw in total, where the first and the second were regarded to be Napoleon and Hitler. An interesting reference. Gold hidden in the mystic milk. As a unique translation that appears in the English language, it can be Googled and found elsewhere that this comes up. Interesting that we likely seem to have an answer.
The Antichrist will be that savior.
What clues are embedded in the quatrains of Nostradamus? Hints to help us identify the third and worst Antichrist. Experts on Nostradamus's Antichrist prophecy believe Napoleon's actions created the conditions for a second and third Antichrist to follow, each who would ravage mankind, just as Nostradamus prophesied.
If you did not have a Napoleon Bonaparte, you would not have had the steps which would have led to a unification of Germany later in the 19th century, which led to the second Antichrist, which created the modern world that created the atmosphere for the oncoming and third and final Antichrist.
The Antichrist. There is a prophecy that states the Antichrist, the beast, will come to seduce mankind. Instead, believers say he will usher in the end of days, Armageddon.
We naturally couldn't complete such a temple nor even begin the building of such a temple without our first being shown how to circumvent or go around the fact that the only things physical with which we could build such a temple up to this current point in time are the pre-existing materials that have already existed in this world through the past ages, soaked in their negative energy. Finally, we see exactly enough for us to understand.